I'm going to show you how to make a strip skirt using your own pattern. It's super easy, and all you need is a big sheet of paper. And I actually have pattern tissue here, but you can certainly use newspaper. You could use, a bunch of pieces of paper taped together, whatever you have on hand. So the first thing that you want to do, well, actually, I should first say that I'm calling this a strip skirt, but it's really just a skirt with 6 gores. So you can call it a 6-gored skirt if you like. It's all up to you. You're the designer. So the first thing you want to do is measure your waist. We're going to do everything with the waist measurement. So I'm going to work off of a 37.5-inch waist. So once you get that number, you're going to divide by 6 and then add 2 for seam allowances. And it seems like a lot to add 2 inches for a seam allowance, but I'm just adding in a bunch of ease, just to give myself a safety net. But you could certainly just add an inch if you're more comfortable with using 1/2-inch seam allowances, but I'm just going to use 2 to make sure I have a nice full skirt. So what you're going to do is you're going to take, let's see, I would be using 8 1/4 as my measurement with a 37.5-inch waist. So I just draw 8 1/4, and there's the top of my skirt. And you can label it 8 1/4, skirt top. You don't have to label it, whatever you want. And then you're going to decipher how long you want your skirt to be. So I like mine to hit the floor. And this is a maxi skirt kind of pattern that I'm dealing with. So what I do is I just take the top of the tape measure, if I'm working with the right side, and drop it to the floor. And you can have a friend assist you if you need, or you can step on it and kind of look at it. I mean, this is a real loosey-goosey pattern. So once you figure out how long you want it to be, measure how long, and, this would be 18. I'm just eyeballing it. Let's say 36. So then I add 5 inches to my 8 1/4 measurement. So that's going to give me 13 1/4. And I just draw that down here. And now you just want to connect your lines. And it's just a gradual angle here that you're doing. And you do want to make sure that your centers are lined up with, your top and bottom line. So you can take some more care than I'm doing to ensure that you're going to have a symmetrical piece. All right, that is all there is to it. That is our pattern piece that we're going to use for the entire skirt. So then you obviously would need to cut it out. And here's one that's all nice and symmetrical. You can also, double check by folding it in half and making sure that your lines meet up. So here's our piece. And I have actually made a little baby pattern piece because it's kind of cumbersome to have all of this fabric on this little table to show you how it all gets constructed. So here's our little piece. And you're going to cut 6 of these from your fabric. Now, I've chosen to do just one fabric for the whole skirt, but this is an opportunity where you can really have fun with fabric, and you can use like an entire collection of quilting cottons. And this is also, I might add, a great way to use quilting cottons in something wearable, because oftentimes you love these fabrics, but you don't want to walk around the street looking like a quilt. So this is a good chance to use up those fabrics and really have fun with it. So you can use, 2 different fabrics. You can use 3 different fabrics. You can use 6 different fabrics. The choice is yours. So once you have all 6 pieces cut from using your pattern piece, you're going to finish the edges. And what I did was I just used a serger and I ran them through the serger, and I actually cut off 1/2 inch on the serger blade as I was going through. And you just, assembly line it and rock them out. And I do this before I actually sew the seam, just because it makes life so much easier, because you want to make sure that they're finished independently and not together. And if you do them all first, then, they don't get in the way, and you're not going to, accidentally clip the seam as you're, zigzag finishing or serge finishing. So you can also zigzag finish if you don't want to break out the serger or if you don't have a serger. So finish all of your edges nice and cleanly, and then we're just going to start sewing them together. So we will head on over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how to do that. You can see that I've got the majority of this little girl's skirt sewn together already. And what I actually like to do is sew the first 3 panels for the skirt front and then the 3 panels for the skirt back, and then sew them together at the side seams. And I'm not really sure why I do it that way. There's really no method to the madness, but I guess I'm used to sewing skirts that way, so that's how I'm sewing this one together. So you're just matching up your seams, put everything right sides together. And I start at the top and move down to the bottom. And all this talk about seam allowances, and we have this 1/2 inch that we're working with here, and I'm actually going to sew this at about 3/8. And you can see I'm not catching the serger stitches with my stitching. I'm just going right inside. You can use that as a guide. And that's going to just, continue to give yourself that little bit of ease that you need. And that's how easy it is. You just do all 6 panels, and then you have your skirt. So now we are going to deal with the waistband. And there are a couple of different things you can do for your waistband. See how cute? You can do an elastic waistband with an elastic casing. And what you want to be sure to recognize when you're doing that is when you fold this over, which you would want to do maybe 1/4 inch and then another 1/2 inch fold for that casing. And you can see, let me turn this wrong side out so you can actually see, that once you fold this, and you want to make sure to press all of your seams open, flat. So everything's lying flat. You'll have a flat waistband, flat hem. So pretend that I've done that already. And you can see that once you fold this over, your seam here is a little bit off from your seam down here because you're going from something narrow to something wider. So what you're going to do when you sew your casing is kind of ease it in through the machine so that these seams end up matching, okay? So it's actually going to gather slightly as you're sewing, just ever so slightly, which is fine because once you insert your elastic, the whole thing's going to gather up anyway. But you just want to make sure you're doing that. Otherwise, you're going to get to the end and you're going to have this really stretchy piece that doesn't fit and it's going to want to pucker. So if you just take into account that while you're starting the casing, you're fine. But another great thing you can do is use fold over elastic. And fold over elastic is traditionally used like in a knit skirt where you're working with something stretchy and then you're putting this fold over elastic over it to go along with the stretch. But I find that it works really great for a woven skirt also. And fold over elastic comes in a bunch of different colors. You can find it everywhere. This particular type is actually made for baby diapers. So it is the most comfortable thing that you will wear on your waist, and it just makes for the most comfortable skirt. So that's what I'm going to work with right here. And you can see it comes in different widths also. I like to choose the widest width I possibly can because you're going to zigzag this on here, and you just, if you're working with something that is this thin, you can see it's going to be a little hard to deal with under the presser foot. So once you make this skirt 500 times, then you can go with something a little more narrow, a little more decorative. So what we're going to do, and I just, put the elastic around the child's waist since we're working with the child's skirt. And so it's, snug but still comfortable. And then you're going to cut that off and position it along the center back of the skirt. And this has a matte side and a shiny side. This one's the matte side. And you can choose whichever side you like. This is going to be more comfortable on the skin, the matte side, so that's what I'm going to use for this. And you're just going to start with this end under the presser foot. And once I get this secured, I'll move this over. And you can certainly pin that part. You know, if your sewing machine isn't right next to you, just pin the starting point. Don't pin the whole thing. There's no sense in doing that. And lower the needle. Oh, first off, I need to switch to a zigzag stitch. Lower the needle. And you just want to make sure that your stitches are going to hit the elastic and that your fabric is sandwiched in between. So if you just match this edge of the fabric with the center of the elastic where there's a natural fold, and just start sewing. Now, what I like to do is go from seam to seam and then stop and readjust, and it's just the easiest way to do it. And you want to stretch the elastic as you sew, match up your other seam, and give it a go. And I'm always putting my needle back in the down position, or some machines have a feature where you can tell it to always stop with the needle down, and that's a time saver. Just keep going from seam to seam. And this is where you can fudge it a little bit too. If you get to the very end and you have excess elastic, or you notice as you're going through that you're not going to have enough because you haven't stretched it enough as you've been sewing, you can kind of adjust as you go and stretch it more along one panel than the other. It's very forgiving. But this gives it a nice finished edge, and you don't have to deal with a casing, and you don't have to deal with a zipper, and you know, you're probably going to wear a shirt over the top of this, so the upper edge isn't going to show. So here I have a little bit left over, which is great. I want it to bypass the beginning, fold over, and just sew right over that part where it meets. And I just back stitch a little to secure the threads. And here you go. Super easy, super cute. Trim our threads. The only thing we have to do is hem, and that's really up to you as well. I like to just do a simple double turned hem, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. You know, again, it's going to depend on where you want your skirt to fall. So now is a good time to try it on and make sure that you have, you know, make sure that it is long enough. If it is a little bit too short for your liking and you can't accommodate a hem, you can always add a fabric strip. That would be a super cute accent, a happy accident, we will call it. Or, you know, you can choose this time to cut it off and, you know, make a shorter skirt, something that hits, you know, just below the knee or however you like it. So I would just do a simple double turned hem and straight stitch it on the machine, and then your skirt is done.